Well, Martha, thank you for that introduction, which makes me sound remotely credible. I'm delighted to be here. And also, thank you, Perrin, for your welcome. And it's great to be with you, and your youthful energy continues in promoting trade between Britain and Canada, and long may that be the case. So delighted to be with you all today. An invitation, I can tell you, to speak with our Canadian friends is always very warmly received at the Department for International Trade. And in fact, I read a survey last year that found that a pretty impressive 80% of Britons hold a positive view of Canada. And in a similar poll, more than 80% of Canadians hold a positive view of Britain too. So higher than for any other country. And it's great to be with you, to speak with you about the exciting opportunities that I think we have to build further on that unique affection and affinity, to deepen our collaboration on trade and investment, to look to more broadly how we can work together to support a global business-led recovery from COVID-19. Because in 2019, prior to COVID, total trade between Britain and Canada neared 40 billion Canadian dollars, an increase of more than 10% on the previous year. And from Manitoban machinery to Albertan animal feed and British Columbian coffee, Britain certainly has a taste for top quality Canadian produce. In 2019, we imported almost 22 million Canadian dollars worth of maple syrup from Quebec alone. And in return, whether it's cars or aircraft or electrical equipment, Canada recognizes our brilliant British engineering and fantastic pharmaceutical products. These exports to each other are directly supporting the lives and livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of British and Canadian people every single day, and of course, supporting their families too. And alongside that growing appetite for each other's goods and services, we are showing ever more trust in each other through our investment choices. I've been particularly pleased to see that many of the investments are also in forward-leaning industries, positioning Britain and Canada at the very forefront of advances in the global marketplace. For example, in March, British plant-based company Meatless Farm opened a 30,000 square foot manufacturing plant in Calgary to utilize the fantastic local peas for their meat alternative products. This is a venture that not only creates jobs, but taps into a market that is growing exponentially, whilst supporting a very sustainable future for our planet too. And then there's the groundbreaking collaboration on quantum technologies, which are expected to have significant impacts in areas ranging from healthcare to defense to financial services. Ours is the very first industry-led partnership between any two countries to develop quantum technologies, putting Britain and Canada at the vanguard of economic and social transformation. So it was clearly a priority for both sides that we protected this blossoming trade and investment relationship as Britain left the EU. And the United Kingdom-Canada Trade Continuity Agreement, which came into effect last month, has been important in doing just that. It provides for the continuity, the stability for businesses, and it preserves the competitive advantages that we enjoy in one another's markets. But more than just locking in those existing benefits, the agreement is a strong foundation for us to now build something even bigger and better together. We see so much untapped potential in areas such as aerospace, the creative industries, financial and business services, food and drink, technology, and the life sciences. So with Britain free to make decisions as a sovereign trading nation for the first time in almost 50 years, we want to go further and faster with our like-minded partners, especially in the strategic areas that are going to be key to the global economy in the coming years, particularly in the areas that will most benefit the British and Canadian people. And so that's why I want to see an ambitious, new United Kingdom-Canada trade deal that is tailored to our specific requirements, bespoke for Britain and customised for Canada. A deal that's designed to deliver for companies of all sizes, sectors and regions, from Halifax, England to Halifax, Nova Scotia, from Banff, Scotland to Banff, Alberta, and from Bala, Wales to Bala, Ontario. The British government will soon be launching a call for input to give businesses, interest groups and members of the public the opportunity to have their say on the priorities for a trade agreement between our countries. And this will be open genuinely to everyone, completed on the gov.uk website. And I'd warmly encourage businesses here today to share your insight and experience so that we can shape our trade and investment relationship in a way that maximizes the benefits for both sides. Following that consultation and the mandate setting process, we then aim to kick off phase 2 negotiations for a trade deal between our countries this autumn. And this is, of course, alongside our hopes to join the CPTPP, of which Canada is, of course, a founder member. Between 2016 and 2019, our trade with the CPTPP member countries has grown at an average rate of 8% a year. So we know that there is desire to trade more with the United Kingdom. And our clear vision for Britain's trade policy is that it is both value generating and values driven. Yes, it's about creating economic growth by supporting the opening up of new markets, breaking down the trade barriers, uncorking new opportunities for business. But it's also about doing that in a way that is consistent with our shared values of sovereignty, democracy, the rule of law, and a fierce commitment to high standards. And we know that these are values that our friends across the CPTPP share, making us natural partners in so many ways. Britain's accession to the agreement would, I believe, inject new energy and expertise into the group's efforts to drive up standards and set the global pace on modern provisions in areas like data and digital and services, to name a few. So I'm pleased that our interest in joining has been well received by all 11 CPTPP members, including the Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau, Minister Ng, and we look forward to a positive discussion and decision from the CPTPP Commission very soon, so that we can begin formal negotiations to join. But with the greatest will in the world, ensuring the benefits of international trade are felt equally by everyone cannot be achieved solely through individual trade agreements. These agreements need to be underpinned by a robust global system with a functioning rule book. And that's not a responsibility for Canada or Britain or any single nation alone. It needs to be a team effort. We must come together as a global community to defend, strengthen and promote trade in multilateral fora. And this will inevitably mean some uncomfortable conversations and facing up to some harsh realities. Public trust has been corroded by pernicious practices, from the use of forced labour to environmental degradation and intellectual property theft. And businesses' confidence has been damaged by unfair use of state-owned enterprises and industrial subsidies that distort markets. But people cannot believe in free trade if it is not fair. And that is why Britain will strive with her G7 partners to restore trust in the global trading system, leading the charge for a revitalised WTO fit for the 21st century, with a rulebook that keeps pace with modern opportunities and challenges. I know that Britain will have no greater supporter in that endeavour than our Canadian friends, and we continue to work closely with Canada on this vital agenda, including through the Ottawa Group. I know it won't be an overnight fix, but it will be a worthwhile investment in the future of the global trading order and our shared prosperity. Because as we build back better from the COVID-19 pandemic, it is absolutely vital that we do so from those strong foundations. 2021 will be seen as a watershed moment in that recovery. Britain is well aware of that. And we are determined to use our G7 presidency and COP26 host status this year to galvanise that action and to make the future fairer, greener, and more prosperous. And that's why Britain's G7 presidency will feature the first ever dedicated trade track. It will offer a perfect opportunity to advance key priorities: WTO reform, the environment, health, digital trade, and as well as driving the discussion on free and fair trade, we will also look at women's economic empowerment. This will closely involve all G7 and B7 members, as we've heard already, as well as hearing from the WTO, the OECD, to fully explore the trade issues that will drive the global economic recovery. We clearly have so much to talk about, and we are looking forward to welcoming Prime Minister Trudeau and the rest of the G7 leaders to beautiful Carbis Bay in June. The relationship, ultimately, between Britain and Canada is a unique one, it's a profound one. And I believe our connection is as strong and relevant today as it ever was. We are united in our commitment to freedom, fairness, and democracy. We are the global champions of security and prosperity, the only two countries to be members of the G7, the G20, the Commonwealth, the Five Eyes, and NATO. And we enjoy very real human connections of family, friendship, and trade that bind us across the Atlantic. So now that Britain has left the EU, and as we all rebuild from the COVID pandemic, we have a timely opportunity to take that close collaboration up another gear, to supercharge trade and investment between us, to secure opportunity and prosperity for our people, and to stand up and speak out as unapologetic champions of free and fair trade on the global stage. And I, for one, can't wait to say what we can achieve together. Thank you very much for inviting me today.
Minister Jayawardena, thank you so much for those introductory remarks that cover the waterfront so well. And I must say it was impressive to hear you mentioning Bala in the heart of Muskoka. I hope we'll be able to invite you there and welcome you there in person before too long. We have about 35 minutes for a conversation with you, and I want to reserve some time for questions from members of the audience. I just want to remind people that if they want to submit questions, we've sent you a link for the Slido app. I'll ask as well that be put up in the chat function by the chamber staff. If you have a question for the minister, please put it into there, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. Minister, you mentioned the long and very successful trading relationship between Canada and the UK. And in many ways, the negotiations that we're in are unique in that we already have a trade agreement. How will the discussions advance upon where we are? And what do you see as the stumbling blocks within those discussions?
Sure. Well, Perrin, thank you. And on Bala, my late father-in-law grew up in Bala, Wales. So that is a place I know very well, and I'm delighted to receive your invitation. I very much hope that travel will reconvene before too long and allow us to build these strong relationships, these important bridges between our countries. And you are right, there is a really unique and exciting position from which we start, because we have an agreement in place today that provides us with that foundation that I talked of. But I think it's a really excellent foundation to do something really special, because the EU, as was 28 countries when we are part of it, couldn't do everything that Britain might have wanted or that Canada might have wanted. And we can now go so much further and faster as a result of simply looking at each other's respective needs. And we are a very complementary economies. We have so much in common, but equally, we need each other in growing our respective businesses. So I think that the Britain's ambition to have a truly world-class FTA with Canada that goes further and faster in key areas of mutual interest is truly deliverable. I believe it's absolutely deliverable, including in particular sectors like professional and business services, which are really important, in financial services, which are my own personal background, and in telecoms. I think these are key areas that we can definitely deliver on. And I think we can go further also in areas that have been boosted by COVID. COVID had been a tough time for everyone. No one's denying that. we've learned a lot about ourselves, we've learned a lot about our economies, we've learned a lot about what is possible. The previously thought impossible has become possible out of necessity. And the necessity of having more e-commerce and digital trade, the flows of data, I think these are areas where we can do more together. We can trust one another to be able to do that. We have an understanding with one another. And so as a result, I don't think that there are stumbling blocks in the way that would prevent us from accessing each other's markets in these areas. We've already been able to identify areas for example, in data or around unnecessary data localization, which harms businesses on both sides, particularly those small businesses that otherwise, they can't afford to set up servers in another country and staff it before they've got clear revenue streams. And yet that's a precursor for being able to bid for contracts often. People want to know there's that capability. So the more we can take out these unnecessary barriers, I think we can secure prosperity for both our peoples. And if I may touch on one barrier, stumbling block, I think you called them. People do in every country, trade agreements often come down to agriculture. Let's be honest about this. We know this. And I think there is great opportunity for us to trade between our two countries because we both believe in high standards. And the CPTPP, as I say, provides a clear route for maintaining high standards. We think this is an excellent opportunity for British farmers also to export to other parts of the world. And I've always been struck when people talked about more trade with Canada and indeed countries around the world. Canada already has a clear track record in producing goods fit for different markets based on the needs of those markets. And I think that shows that we don't all have to have exactly the same standards domestically, so long as we're willing to export produce that is at the right standard for the market that we're selling it into. And that's what trade is about. It's not about enforcing one thing on another. It is actually about saying, let's make sure we can sell our top quality produce to the markets that want them. And I think there are opportunities there. So that's a potential stumbling block if we let it become one. But I actually think it's a huge opportunity.
In your remarks, you mentioned CPTPP and the fact that Canada is a founding member. It's exciting to think of Britain applying to become a member of CPTPP, and the position of the Canadian Chamber is that we welcome other countries joining the agreement. The broader we can make it, the better. All of us will benefit from that. What do you see in terms of terms of both the process and the timetable for Britain to be able to join?
Well, we have submitted our letter of intent, and so that is, our clear step in the right direction for now. Ultimately, we are now waiting for the decision from the CPTPP Commission. We hope that will come soon, but in true government speak, soon is the answer I can give you. The opportunities of us joining are significant, though. I mean, CPTPP as a trade area, and I think this is such an important point. We are, CPTPP. People say, why have we left the EU only to join CPTPP? And the point is, it's not a trade bloc. It's it allows everyone to trade more freely with one another, negating 95% of tariffs, while at the same time allowing everyone to have their own sovereignty on laws, on borders, on money, and so on. And that's a very impressive grouping that we are very keen to join. It already has, it already covers something like £9 trillion of GDP, is my understanding, something like 13% of global GDP. If Britain were to join, that would lead to 16% of GDP, and that's a significant opportunity for all members. So we're delighted that our interest has been well received so far. We hope that will mean that we can go through as quickly as possibly as anyone possibly can. Of course, no one's done it before. That's the honest truth here. No one's done it before. We will be the first, and so identifying the exact process is something that I know the Commission will be looking at very closely, and we very much look forward to working with them. It certainly is key to, I believe, the new global trading system. It's going to be a really important driver of economic growth in the world, and the Prime Minister's integrated review that he's announced recently. Boris Johnson announced to the House of Commons that the integrated review demonstrates our tilt to the Indo-Pacific, because we believe that the Indo-Pacific, where we see the CPTPP to be at the heart of, is going to be a really crucial part of the 21st century, and we want to be part of it.
Can we come back to the question of Brexit and the impact of that? It won't surprise you. I've no doubt you've heard it many, many times that for much of the world, the perception when Britain voted for Brexit was that it was turning inward on itself and pulling back from the world. And yet the message that you and the Prime Minister are trying to give is quite a different one. Now, did Brexit represent an inward turning and a withdrawal from the world on the part of the UK?
This is a super question, because yes, there were a lot of misconceptions about Brexit. You're absolutely right. And having been elected in 2015, the vast majority of my time in Parliament has been dedicated to this one issue, with the referendum only a year after I was first elected. And it was absolutely not about pulling up the drawbridge and saying no to the world. It was totally the opposite of that, as far as I'm concerned. The problem with the EU was that people felt that it was an exclusive club that didn't want to actually participate on the world stage and were very inward and protectionist. And we didn't want to be part of that anymore. We voted to take back control of our laws, our borders, our money, of course, our trade policy, because that allows us to be more open with the world, but on Britain's terms. And so we've got now a points-based immigration system that says people from all over the world can come to Britain, not just people from inside the European Union. But it's on our terms, and that it's not just anyone that can come to Britain. It's around having the right skills, the contribution to our economy, which I believe any sovereign nation should be able to determine. That any sovereign nation surely should be able to determine who comes in to their country. And I know folks from India, for example, I've had some calls regards India earlier today, and they're saying that they're delighted that there is now a level playing field, whereas before, if you were from Germany or Romania, you could come to Britain, no questions asked. But if you're from anywhere else in the world, there are so many hurdles. So I think this is actually about being open and outward looking. On the trade sphere, the opportunity to do more with countries like Canada is one that we definitely want to seize. And that's about Britain ultimately being at the heart of the global trading system once again. This is going back to Robert Peel and the formation of the modern Conservative Party with the Tamworth Manifesto and so on, and the fights over the Corn Laws. And we've been through it all over again here over the last 4 years. But the genius of the British people is they voted in a referendum because they believe, and I believe that they are right, that Britain on her own can be far more agile as a standalone sovereign country than as one of 28. And that's going to allow us to negotiate these sorts of deals with Canada on terms that work best for Canada and for Britain, rather than on terms that are the lowest common denominator across Europe. And I think that's a very exciting prospect.
I want to talk about multilateral approaches to trade, but and the need to take down barriers and maintain a momentum in opening up trade. The great motor for that over the course of the last couple of decades has, of course, been the United States. And yet under the Trump administration, we did see a country turning inward on itself, pulling back from the rest of the world, pulling out of multilateral institutions, or at least minimizing its involvement there. I think we'd be very interested in hearing your perspective from the UK as to what does the new administration in Washington mean? We're seeing a doubling down on Buy American rules, for example. It's an administration that believes in multilateralism, but we're not going back to the status quo ante. What's your perception of what the new administration means for global trade?
Yeah, in London, that we are very happy to work with whoever is in the White House, because we see it to be in our mutual interest. And both Canada and the United Kingdom have a very special and enduring relationship with the United States. based on our long history, based on our commitment to shared values. And I'm struck by the opportunities that exist for both of our countries with the United States. And those are opportunities that, of course, it is right we continue to grow for the benefits of our people. The policy of America first, and now Buy America, Buy American, of course, have great resonance domestically. But actually, it's trade that will create more jobs, because it will allow capital, finite resources of capital, to be directed at those sectors that deliver the most return for the people of the country. And so I'm a strong proponent of freer, fairer trade as the way to really enhance long-term prosperity, even if it means that in the short run there might be some change required in the structure of the economy. But as historic advocates, both the United Kingdom and Canada, I think we should be partnering to develop these, I believe, worker-centric strategies that actually say, how can we increase wages? It's by developing new technologies, it's about investing in the future. Britain is not going to compete on producing widgets, neither is Canada. We can compete on producing high-end, high-quality, high-value products, because that's the sort of economy that both Britain and Canada are. High-wage, high-standard economies. And so I think we've got a great opportunity to leverage the G7, the G20, the WTO to that end. I do appreciate a frustration with WTO under the previous administration and now. And that's why it's crucial that we reform it. If we want multilateralism to work, and I believe we should want it to work, and that is the way that we maintain a rules-based system that benefits everyone by having clarity for businesses and for governments. If we're serious about that, the WTO does need reform. And I think we can definitely work together to ensure that fair play is at the heart of the WTO in the future.
Well, you've anticipated one of the first questions to come in from the audience, which is, does the UK think that we can fix the WTO dispute mechanism?
General, that she's serious about proper reform, wanting to work with partners around the world to do that. And I'm very excited that I could go further than the WTO has done before, including areas, including services, which the WTO is based on quite outdated rules today, and perhaps an outdated assessment of the world, because the world has moved on quite a lot in the last 20 plus years. So I'm very excited about the opportunities. I think working together, we can find a route through that delivers for our business communities. And I think Britain and Canada have a really important role in that. Britain, of course, has now retaken her seat at the WTO. In February last year, as soon as we had left the EU, we attended a session of the WTO plenary, and we believe that Britain, working with her allies, can achieve the change that many have long wanted, but for one reason or another has not been possible. I think we've got to call out some of the unfair trading practices that do occur elsewhere in the world. And if people are not happy about that, so be it. But that is only right in a rules-based system, that we should point out where people are not abiding by the rules. And where the rules are too loose, too weak, then we need to reform them so that they are clearer. And you're right, the dispute resolution mechanisms do need to be looked at closely to make sure that they have the right effect. So this is all work that I hope is achievable. And Britain remains very strong supporter of the WTO, because we see that it's instrumental in the rules-based system.
Now, another very topical WTO-related issue is, of course, the TRIPS waiver. And there's been a question submitted from the audience on that. What is the UK's position on the TRIPS waiver?
So we've not yet seen evidence that says that we should pursue this alternative path. Instead, what we have done is been one of the largest contributors to COVAX and other schemes. I think we've spent something like 1.75 billion US dollars on various schemes to make access to vaccines possible to people around the world. That shows that we are serious about defeating COVID around the world. We're only going to succeed in defeating COVID if we all defeat it. It is not about simply vaccinating our nation and then saying job done, because that's how we end up with new strains of the virus that could come back all over the world wherever the vaccine has been successful. And of course, on a humanitarian grounds, it would be the wrong thing to do as well. We want to look after people, our friends all over the world. There's scenes in India right now, for example, are deeply distressing to many people here, and I'm sure around the world. And we are now we've sent a huge number of items to them. We sent 600 key items of equipment in the first batch of equipment to go out there. We've sent some new oxygen production equipment, huge equipment from Northern Ireland recently, and we're offering advice and guidance to them as well from, if they ever need it, from our top scientists and clinicians, our chief medical officer, our chief scientific officer, advisor. So we are serious about helping people around the world. We've made those contributions to various global schemes like COVAX. We're making bilateral support available as well. And we've not seen evidence that says that pursuing this alternate path is necessary or desirable. But of course, we leave everything open to review. We'll look very closely at any new evidence that comes forward. Because you never say never. That's the route to be fixed in a position. If the evidence changes, then of course we'll look at that.
Can we turn to China? In so many different ways, China is sui generis. It's unlike any other country anywhere in the world, and that certainly applies to its participation in multilateral institutions and in the global economy as a whole. Right now, the relationship between Canada and China is fraught on so many levels. Can you describe the relationship of the UK with China and what your strategy is? How do you believe that the industrialized democracies should be dealing with China?
So we're clear-eyed on our relationship with China. We continue to trade with China because that's in our mutual interest. We have significant trade flows every year. They are the world's second biggest economy, and that's perfectly right and proper. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we don't raise our views on issues of concern. For example, the Uyghurs, and frankly also the unfair competition through use of state-owned enterprises and industrial subsidies in the trade sphere. So, of course, we raise these issues with our Chinese counterparts. There are no plans to negotiate a trade agreement with China. We believe that there are other countries that are priorities like Canada that we want to pursue. And we do not believe that there needs to be a trade agreement with China at this point. And we will continue to seek to uphold our values around the world. I said earlier, we want trade to be value generating, but values driven. And as we trade with them, we will continue to say where we believe things are wrong. The use of forced labor is wholly inappropriate. It is totally wrong. And we must all stand together against this. So Britain, I think, has a role to play as part of the international community in calling that sort of behavior out. It comes back to this point. If we're extolling the virtues of free trade and people in our countries see that, then they do not believe that free trade is ever fair. It's got to be fair too. And we've got to make sure that together, those of us who do play by the rules do secure the change that we need to see. Interestingly, of course, we've also announced we want to negotiate an agreement with India, who are near neighbours of China, obviously, they face that sort of intense competition from near neighbours who do not play by the rules, and it is not simply the West that stands for the rules, but folks in Asia too. who recognise the problems of state-owned enterprises, as I say, intellectual property theft. I was at a 3D printer in Peterborough, in Cambridgeshire, and they said that their 3D printer had been ripped off in China to such an extent that the instruction manual had the same mistakes in it when translated to Mandarin. Everything had been copied word for word, and chip to chip, and it was extraordinary to hear stories like that. So we've got to do more, and Britain stands firm on this.
We had a similar experience with a Canadian manufacturing company that attended a trade show in China, and they found brochures then being distributed by a Chinese company that was using pictures that were taken by the Canadian company and was in their brochure, including Canadian personnel. And when I attended a meeting at the Canadian Embassy some years back, they mentioned that often they would have their Chinese hosts would invite them, government hosts would invite them to a reception and say, "We're so proud to be able to have Canadian ice wine." They asked to see the bottle, and it said "Product of Niagara" with a very nice picture of the Rocky Mountains on it. So whoever did this in somebody's garage somewhere didn't understand Canadian geography exactly. China is an increasingly important source of investment in the world, and it's an important source of investment in the UK as well. What restrictions does the UK place on Chinese investment, and how does this differ from investment from other sources?
Well, we want to be a very open country still, and so where there is Chinese investment coming in, we want to be open to that because we believe free trade should be fair to everyone. But we have recognised under the Prime Minister Boris Johnson the risks to national security from certain critical infrastructure. For example, the rollout of 5G technology, and it's an interesting one because our current fixed broadband, fixed telephone lines, and 4G are, of course, integrated by Huawei technology. And so it is in a few years' time that we will actually be able to unravel that, because once 5G is rolled out, only then we will be able to, in effect, decouple 4G from, and dare I say, fixed line telephony from the current system. But other than on that sort of critical infrastructure, on the national security sphere, we want to be open to investment from around the world, including from China. Nothing stops us from, of course, standing firm, as I've said, on our values, making clear to the Chinese government that we do not believe what they are doing is right in certain instances. But at the same time, that's not to stop Chinese investment coming in here. The point is, what we're not going to do is cozy deals anymore that say, we'd like money from you and we'll be quiet about things that we're unhappy with. We'll, of course, speak up where we think that something is wrong. And I hope that you've seen that from across the Atlantic in terms of, for example, as I say, the plight of the Uyghurs, which is terrible. And of course, what we've seen in Hong Kong as well, where Britain has again stood firm and been open and generous, of course, to Hong Kong nationals, Hong Kong residents, so that they can become British nationals in due course, and that they are able to maintain the freedoms that they were promised by the Chinese government at the point of one country, two systems, which does not seem to be heeded anymore.
Let's turn to some more of the questions from the audience. How will telecom choices impact working relationships with countries with common frameworks and goals, i.e. Huawei?
Well, yes, I mean, we sort of touched on this in passing. I mean, so Huawei technology, to be fair, Huawei technology is very advanced. And it enabled the rollout of fiber optic broadband to folks across the United Kingdom. It also enabled the rollout of 4G technology across the UK. And so that's been really beneficial. And I think, we've got to be good enough to say, yeah, that's good technology. But the problem is that 5G is going to now be involved in so many more aspects of people's lives that it is not in our national interest, has been determined, that should include Huawei technology. And I believe that is a policy that's subscribed to by all members of Five Eyes. And we've been pretty clear that we want to continue to be open. As I say, people still can buy Huawei phones if they want, for example. Not everyone has to buy a Samsung phone or an Apple phone or whatever. But at the same time, what we don't want is for potentially foreign state actors to be in control of critical infrastructure in our country. And 5G is going to transform the way people live. So it's really, really important that we have sovereign capability that we are sure about. There's no room for uncertainty anymore.
Now, in your opening remarks, you, in response to my question about stumbling blocks in the negotiations between Canada and the UK, you mentioned agriculture as being one of the key issues, as it always is in trade negotiations. Dennis from CropLife Canada has a question with regard to that, and I think you can probably see where he's coming from. Now that the UK has left the EU, will the government be taking a science-based approach to trade as it relates to biotechnology and agriculture? This has been a sore point between Canada and the EU.
So we've got a consultation live on this right now, so I'm not going to prejudge the consultation. Our Department for the Environment is responsible for these areas of policy, and they are indeed looking for input from industry and others for ideas on how we can improve our system in the United Kingdom. The truth is of the EU, as I said earlier, that they are unnecessarily protectionist. There are sorts of black spot and oranges that are particularly, that rule is designed to prohibit oranges from South Africa, for example, to the benefit of Spanish producers of oranges. It's not about whether it's actually dangerous. It is simply a protectionist measure. But there may be other barriers that it is entirely appropriate to retain. So that's why we're going to have this consultation. And this is why we're going through that right now. And we're really keen to hear from anyone, frankly, on the phone, on this call, or otherwise, so that we can get the very best systems in Britain in the years ahead.
The B7 was very focused on issues related to the greening of the economy, and there was a strong consensus from the business community from throughout those countries about the importance of moving ahead. But there are challenges, obviously, on the way. And one of the questions that has come in is, what is the UK position on carbon border adjustments?
Again, I'm afraid I'm going to have to give you a watch this space, a bit like the science-based approach. The Board of Trade, which dates back, 400 years, something like that, has been reconstituted now that we've left the European Union. And the President of the Board of Trade has commissioned a report on green trade, which is going to include a look at carbon border adjustments. So we are very interested in this area. We want to make sure that we're not simply offshoring carbon production, because that wouldn't be in anyone's interests. That's offshoring jobs, but to no effect for the environment. We've got to be clear. If we're tackling the decarbonisation agenda for the world, then it doesn't matter where those carbon emissions are produced. We've got to make sure that we're not just offshoring it to, dare I say, a poorer country in the world, and in turn, not just disadvantaging our people by reducing jobs in our country. So watch this space on that one, I'm afraid, as well. But that report will be published online on gov.uk in the next couple of months.
Next question is, what is the status of the UK's trade discussions with the US? What sort of progress are you making?
Well, obviously, there's been a bit of a hiatus because of the change of administration, but Catherine Tai is well respected on both sides of the aisle, so to speak, and I think a huge support from Republicans as well as Democrats in her confirmation hearing to that end. We've had some initial discussions with USTR and her team. We're very keen to continue to progress our possible trade agreement, but we've always been very clear that we're not going to put a deadline on it. We're not going to be driven by the ending of the authority this summer. We're going to make sure that when we sign up to a deal, it's in Britain's national interest. And if not, well, we don't need to agree a deal. So we're willing to see it run for as long as it needs to make sure we get the right deal. If they want to renew the authority, that's of course open to them. But we believe it's in our mutual interest to agree a deal at some point, because we're number one investors in each other's markets. They're our number one goods, single country goods, goods and services export market. We're number 4, I think, for them. So there's good economic sense behind this. This isn't a political deal. This is an economic deal. And I think there's good economic sense that says our businesses will be able to do more together, create more jobs, create more prosperity if we get a deal done. But it's got to be on terms that work for us both. So, we continue to have very warm relations and positive discussions, but we're not going to put any sort of deadline on it because that wouldn't be in our interest. I'm confident that where there's a will, there's a way. So I'm confident we will be able to secure an agreement in the fullness of time. But who knows when that will be.
Now, we don't have the same impediments for the negotiations between Canada and the UK. And one of the questions that's come in is how quickly can we reach an agreement?
Well, we want to start the work later this year, don't we? So that's really positive. We, of course, secured the continuity agreement in a matter of months. But this is a new agreement. It's going to go further. I believe we can do it quickly. We were able to secure a deal, for example, with Japan quite quickly, which went further than the EU. We're working with Australia, as you know, and New Zealand. We're moving apace there. And it's because we all share common values. We are complementary economies. We play by the rules. And so we don't have to, unnecessarily defend our countries from each other, because actually trade between our countries will make us all more prosperous. I'm confident we can move quickly, and I hope the same is felt on your shores, because of course it always requires two to tango.
Final question from the audience: what is the UK position on other potential applicant countries to CPTPP, such as Taiwan, the Philippines, and so on?
Well, not being a member of CPTPP yet, we probably should opine on who else should join. I think that would be a bit forward. But I would observe that RCEP has been set up, which also involves some countries in Southeast Asia, but of course differently includes China. And there does seem to be that difference of groupings between, obviously not the opportunity for CPTPP to be the bastion of free trade versus China being the largest player in RCEP by quite some margin. So look, it'd be wrong of the UK, it'd be presumptuous of the United Kingdom to opine on who else should join a group that we're not yet a member of. But ultimately, free trade is good for everyone. And the more folks that can trade freely, whether that's through membership of CPTPP or otherwise through bilateral agreements, that's got to be positive for businesses, hasn't it?
Minister, final question from me. On the issue of the global economy, global trade, multilateralism, the analogy is often made to a bicycle of having to move forward. There's an unfortunate analogy to a shark from time to time as well, that it has to continue moving forward or else it stalls. What is your sense as you look at on the world in terms of the future for multilateralism and open trade? it seems to me in many ways that we've lost the momentum that was so strong and powerful just a few years ago. Can it be restored, and are you basically optimistic about that, or are you concerned that countries are becoming more protectionist?
I'm actually very optimistic, and a potential silver lining of what has been a very dark cloud, COVID, is that we have seen trade has been critical in defending our people from this ghastly virus. Without trade, we wouldn't have the drugs getting to the right markets. Without trade, we wouldn't have PPE coming to the people who need it. If we didn't have trade, we wouldn't have vaccines going all around the world. And I think trade has found a new lease of life as a result of this horrible time, because people have seen that protectionism actually harms people in their, not only their livelihoods, but in their lives. So I'm very optimistic that we can seize that lesson from COVID as we go forward, continue to keep our borders open to free-flowing, fair trade, and work with partners all over the world to make sure that those who do not play by the rules are held to account. And I'm pretty confident that WTO has legs for the future. I think the new leadership of the WTO is very encouraging, and it will require folks like Britain and Canada and our friends to work together, including through the Ottawa Group, to make sure that we deliver the reform that is necessary. And I believe we can, and I believe it's in everyone's interest, because the only way that we will deliver for our people and create the jobs that they need as a result of building back better from COVID is by making sure that there is more trade, more investment flowing all around the world. I believe it can be done. I'm sure it can be done with our friends in Canada and elsewhere in the world. And so I say, let's get on with it.
Minister, thank you so much. This is a discussion that we've covered an enormous range of territory over the course of the last few minutes, but it's a discussion that could continue for hours and that will, in many ways, continue for a long time yet to come. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for the priority that you put on the relationship between the UK and Canada. We certainly share your perspective that this is a relationship that's founded on a very solid foundation, but it's one in which we can build a structure that is even greater and better for both of our countries. So thank you for being with us today.
A great pleasure, Perrin. Thank you very much.